All right. Welcome in, everybody, to another deep dive with us.
Yeah.
Today we're looking into a story that really had a lot of people in the cybersecurity world talking.
For sure.
And and that was this whole ransomware thing that was going on, supposedly with Spain's tax agency.
Right, the AET.
The AET, yeah. And, you probably saw some headlines about this.
Yeah, it definitely made the rounds.
Group called Trinity, claiming that they got away with like 560 gigabytes of data.
Yeah. A huge amount.
Huge, huge. And, we wanted to go a little bit deeper than those headlines, though.
Oh, yeah.
And luckily, we have a couple of experts who are really looking into this thing from the very beginning.
Yeah, we were right there in the thick of it.
Yeah, and I want to introduce everybody to Tony and Ramon.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
So what was it about this case that made it so interesting? I mean, we hear about ransomware attacks all the time.
Yeah. You know what's really interesting about this one is how public it all was, right? Like, this wasn't just playing out on some hidden dark web forum.
Right.
This was happening on platforms that I bet a lot of people listening to this use every single day, like even like Telegram, LinkedIn.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it was really out in the open.
That's crazy. So, like, not your typical super secret hacker stuff.
Right. Not at all.
Huh. So, Tony, I heard that you were actually one of the first people to get your hands on, like, a sample of that leaked data.
Yeah, that's right. I managed to find a sample that Trinity had posted on their dark website, but get this, it was set to disappear after 6 days.
Oh, wow.
Talk about a ticking clock.
Yeah, that'll get your heart racing for sure.
Yeah.
But is that like a typical ransomware tactic? Like, is that something that these groups do just to kind of like add that extra pressure?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Groups like Trinity, they thrive on that hype.
Right.
They know that the more fear, the more uncertainty they create, the more likely victims are going to be to just pay up quickly,
Yeah, makes sense. Get it over with.
All about the money, right?
Yeah. So walk us through a little bit how this thing first kind of showed up on your radar.
Sure. So it was a Sunday morning, pretty typical, just scrolling through my usual cybersecurity feeds.
Right.
And suddenly all this news about this possible AEAT attack started popping up.
Okay.
December 2nd.
Okay, so pretty recent.
Yeah, just a couple of months ago.
And I imagine that like alarm bells immediately started going off in your head.
Oh, absolutely. You know that AEAT, they hold incredibly sensitive financial data.
Oh, yeah.
If they got hit, it would be disastrous.
It's huge, yeah.
Not just for those people and businesses whose info got leaked, but for, like, Spain's economy, too.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, Ramon, were you seeing this unfold on your social media, too?
Oh, yeah. It was everywhere, all over my feeds.
Mm-hmm.
And the reaction, pure panic. I mean, people were freaking out, worried about their personal info, their money.
Yeah, of course.
It was a mess. Really shows you how quickly things can spread on social media, both the good info and the bad.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword for sure.
Yeah.
So that's where having these experts like you guys comes in, right? Like to kind of cut through all of that noise.
Yeah, for sure.
So Tony, how did you start like digging into this and using your network and everything to figure out what was real and what wasn't?
Well, the first thing I did was reach out to my contacts in the cybersecurity community, right? And just trying to get a handle on what actually happened,
Oh, yeah.
Because there were tons of rumors going around, but hardly any like concrete details.
Right.
So that was my first step.
Okay. And then that's where that leaked data sample comes in.
Exactly.
The one that was going to disappear. What happened with that?
Well, so Ramon actually joined me to take a look at the data.
Okay.
And we noticed that it vanished from the dark web way sooner than we thought, before that 6-day countdown.
Oh, really?
More like a few hours. Yeah, it was weird. And it definitely raised some red flags for us.
Yeah, I bet. That's really strange.
Yeah.
Was that like, were they trying to control who had access to it, or was it like a way to make it seem more valuable, or what?
Hard to say,
Right.
It really made us question their motives.
Right.
Like, were they trying to, like, create this sense of scarcity so they could drive up the price of the data, or was there something else going on entirely?
Yeah.
It was a tough one.
So what did you guys find when you actually started looking at the data?
So as we started digging into it, we began to notice some things that didn't really line up with what Trinity was claiming.
Okay.
For instance, we saw that a lot of the people and businesses whose data was in the sample, they all had physical addresses in the same city.
Oh, wow.
Which is kind of unusual for like a nationwide attack on a central agency like the AET, right?
Yeah, that seems like it'd be a lot more spread out if they actually got into their systems.
Exactly.
So what else was there that kind of jumped out at you guys?
Well, Trinity was making a big deal about about the AET's revenue,
Okay.
right? Claiming it was in the tens of millions.
Right.
Trying to present this like they had, infiltrated the agency's financial systems, like they had all the secret info.
Yeah.
But then we found out that that revenue figure, it was publicly available on this website called ZoomInfo.
Oh, no.
Yeah, anyone could have found it.
So they were just taking like public info and making it seem like they had like gotten this top secret intel.
Exactly. It made us really question how much access they actually had to the AET systems.
Wow. This is really starting to sound like a misdirection play from Trinity. Like maybe this wasn't some massive nationwide attack on the AET like they wanted everyone to believe.
Right.
So what do you think was really going on then?
Well, all the evidence seemed to point to a much smaller, more localized breach.
Okay.
We started to think that the real target might have been, like a local accounting firm, or maybe even a regional office that handles tax data for a specific area, something like that.
So even if a big organization like the AEAT, even if they have really good security,
right,
a smaller partner like a vendor or something, if they have weaker defenses, that can become like a weak link in the chain.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what hackers look for,
Wow.
They target these smaller organizations as a way to get at those bigger, juicier targets.
Okay, so we've got this misdirection from Trinity.
Right.
And a much more localized breach than they initially claimed.
Right.
Plus these supply chain vulnerabilities.
Mm-hmm.
But what about that initial claim about stealing 560 gigabytes of data? What happened with that?
So that's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
So Trinity, they set this deadline, December 31st, New Year's Eve.
Oh, wow.
They said they were going to release all that data.
Okay.
It was like a New Year's cliffhanger.
Right.
But nothing. Silence.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we've got a whole bunch of questions. Right? Like,
Yeah.
Why didn't they release the data? What does all this mean for the actual victims?
Mm-hmm.
Anyone out there who's, worried about the safety of their own data? What do we make of all this?
Yeah, those are some really important questions.
Yeah.
And I think those are the questions we need to really dive into next.
Okay.
In part 2.
All right, so everybody stick with us. We'll be right back after a quick break. All right, so we're back, and we're picking up this ransomware mystery with a lot of unanswered questions, right?
Mm-mm.
I mean, Trinity went totally silent after making this huge claim about stealing all this data.
It is definitely a head scratcher.
Yeah, no kidding. So
Okay.
so what happened? I mean, did they just get cold feet or what?
Well, it's important to remember that a lot of these ransomware attacks are really all about the money.
Right.
It's about extorting money. It's not always about causing chaos, just about the bottom line.
So when it became clear that their claims about hitting the AEAT directly were kind of falling apart, maybe they realized that the potential payoff just wasn't big enough to take the risk.
Yeah, I think that's a real possibility once their leverage was gone.
Right.
Especially with, cybersecurity experts like us starting to poke holes in their story.
Right.
They might have figured, hey, you know what? Cutting our losses is the smartest move here.
Right. So it's like a bluff that just didn't pay off.
Exactly.
But this case, I mean, it got so much attention from the media.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Do you think that played a role in them going quiet?
Absolutely. This story went way beyond the usual cybersecurity circles, right?
Right.
This was front page news in Spain, internationally. That kind of attention. It can be a huge problem when you're trying to operate in the shadows.
I bet, yeah. They probably didn't want that kind of heat from law enforcement or even from rival cybercriminal groups.
Oh, for sure. Sometimes laying low is the best move.
Right. Especially when you've attracted that much attention.
Yeah, exactly.
So is there any chance that they never even had the data in the first place? Could this have been a total lie from the beginning?
It's not impossible.
Right.
These groups, they're masters of manipulation. They know how to create fear, how to create uncertainty.
So maybe this whole data dump threat was just a mind game.
Yeah, it could be.
Designed to scare their target into paying the ransom, even if they didn't actually have anything to back it up?
Exactly. Sometimes, the threat itself can be more powerful than actually carrying it out.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
But still, we're talking about 560 gigabytes of data.
Right.
I mean, that is a massive amount of information.
It is.
You can't just, make something like that up.
Well, true. But remember, we only ever saw a tiny sample of that data.
Okay.
It's possible that they might have exaggerated the size of what they really had
Okay.
to make their threat seem bigger, scarier,
right,
more impactful.
Yeah, make it seem like they had more to lose. So we're really getting into the realm of speculation now.
We are?
I mean, we've got a few possible explanations for why Trinity went silent.
Right.
But no real definitive answers.
That's right.
And this is where it must get frustrating for you as investigators, right?
Yeah, well, it's definitely part of the job.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity investigations. They rarely have these neat and tidy solutions.
Right.
You know, it's a constant process of gathering information, analyzing patterns, trying to stay one step ahead of the adversary.
And in this case, the adversary just disappeared.
Yeah, vanished into thin air.
So, I mean, that doesn't mean you just stop looking, right?
Not at all. We may not have all the answers about Trinity or about how much data they really stole.
Right.
But what we do have are some really valuable lessons we can learn from all this.
Okay, so for everyone listening who's trying to understand all this, what are the key takeaways here? Like, what should we be thinking about when we see headlines like this?
Well, first of all, don't take anything at face value, especially in the world of cybersecurity.
Right, it's moving so fast.
Exactly. Don't just believe the first reports you see or the most sensational headlines.
So do your own research. Look for verification from sources you can trust.
Exactly. Look for evidence from, cybersecurity researchers, independent analysts, law enforcement agencies.
Right.
And remember, the cybersecurity community, we have a really important role to play in fighting misinformation.
So you're saying that we can all help with this, not just the experts.
Absolutely. When we share information responsibly, when we fact-check claims, when we question what we see online, we make it harder for these groups to spread their message of fear and uncertainty.
Right, so it's like we're all part of a giant neighborhood watch, but for the internet.
Yeah, I like that.
So we've talked a lot about the technical stuff, the investigation, what the attackers might have been thinking.
Right.
But there's another side to this whole thing that we haven't really talked about yet.
And that is?
The human impact. The real people who are affected by these attacks.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a really important part of this story, something that we need to explore a little bit more.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're going to do in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back. All right, so we're back. And, we spent a lot of time in this deep dive talking about the technical side of this whole ransomware thing.
Yeah.
All the clues and the red flags, how the investigation went down.
Right.
But I kind of want to shift gears a little bit here and talk about something that I think sometimes gets lost in all the digital noise.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the human element.
Yeah.
The real people.
Absolutely.
Who are actually affected by these attacks.
It's easy to get caught up in the technical stuff and forget that there's, real people on the other side of all this.
Totally. And I was thinking about this as we were going through everything.
Yeah.
Right? Like, imagine if you were one of the people whose data was potentially stolen in this breach, right? Maybe you're a small business owner. You rely on that financial data to keep things running.
Right. Or maybe you're just someone who filed your taxes.
Right.
And now you're worried about your social security number, your bank info, all that being out there in the hands of criminals.
Oh, yeah. And that feeling of like violation, right?
Yeah.
Like your privacy's been invaded and you have no idea what the consequences could be.
Yeah. The stress, the anxiety, it can be overwhelming.
Absolutely.
And that's just one side of it, right? I mean, there's also all the cybersecurity professionals who are working around the clock to investigate these incidents, contain the damage, try to help the victims recover.
Right. People like you and Tony you guys are constantly dealing with these new threats, these new challenges.
Yeah.
And I imagine there's a lot of pressure to stay ahead of the bad guys.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that has to take a toll.
It definitely can.
Yeah.
We see firsthand the damage these attacks can cause, not just to systems, not just to data, but to people's lives.
Yeah.
Their livelihoods, their well-being, and it's what drives us,
right?
To keep learning, keep adapting, and to keep fighting to make the digital world a safer place.
And it's a fight that we all need to be a part of, right?
Absolutely.
Individuals, organizations, governments.
Yeah, nobody is immune to these threats.
So true. So as we wrap up this deep dive into this AE8 ransomware mystery, what's the most important message you want to leave people with?
I would say stay informed, stay vigilant.
Okay.
And remember that we all have a role to play in making the digital world safer. Question what you see online. Think critically about the information that's coming at you.
Right.
Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Those are some really great points. And a huge thanks to both of you for taking us behind the scenes of this, fascinating and kind of unsettling cybersecurity incident.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And for everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of how these attacks actually work.
Yeah.
The challenges that investigators face
Mm-hmm.
and the real human stories that are at the heart of it all.
For sure.
And remember, knowledge is power, right? The more you know about cybersecurity, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself
Absolutely.
and the people you care about.
Thanks for joining us.